Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the Social Media Millionaire Podcast. I'm Kenda, not Kendra.
I'm Soren. Like an airplane. Anyways, yeah. I still think it's funny that you've decided in the last 2 weeks that you are going to make sure everyone knows how to say your name correctly. But I love it. I love it. We got a great episode planned for you guys today.
We're going to talk about personal brands, what they actually are. And I am going to stop saying personal brand because I don't think that really explains what it is. It's like founder focused content.
Well, I mean, you should be making founder focused content, but I mean,
It's like founder focused content. Like that's really what it is. So if you do a founder focused brand effectively, then you should, one, essentially completely cut out the price shopping phase and not be having people comparing you to your competitors, because you are going to be so far differentiated and just really resonating with them and their values that they're not going to be looking around, and price isn't going to be an option.
that's the goal.
That's the goal.
And I mean, that comes back to all brand too, right? Why you go with a name brand over a no name brand.
But like the personal brand element is like it is the only, like, if it's done effectively, is the only like surefire way for you to just like obliterate your competitors, because like it won't even be like a comparison.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's what gives you what a lot of people refer to as like pricing power, right? Because like if you're like, let's say like social media management, for
Yeah.
example,
And it gives you
like
that competitive edge.
super common, like to have like social media management 2K monthly price, right?
Mhm.
But for example, if you want to hire Ken Delaney or Gary Vee or Neil Patel or any of these like people who have actually built really big brands around doing social media management, you're going to pay more for it. In part because of its name brand recognition. In part, it's also, like the results they get and drive, right? But like that's like the differentiator between like them and some random person who's doing like social media management from home that just started out.
Yeah. I think the other thing is like when it comes to, doing it effectively, what you should also see is, one, like an increase in your conversion rate, and two, you'll notice kind of an influx of driver and expressive buyers. They are very activated by those personal connection points and really understanding and having context as to who you are, what you do, and like why they should listen to you is really impactful. And this goes back to that mere exposure effect in sales psychology. We were talking about this earlier. It's like all the studies that have come out, and like PR experts that understand, like, and a good example is like politics, especially for like Americans, is something
Well,
that you
and
understand
we
is
were
like
specifically talking about like this election cycle.
well, but not just this election cycle. It's just that with that mere exposure effect, like people are more likely to vote for somebody that they know more about, even if they don't fully like agree with all of their ideology and their values. And the other thing is that with that personal brand, what it really does is it provides context, because we as humans, and like going back to our primal brain and understanding our psychology there, we don't trust the unknown. We don't trust what we can't place. And so politicians are more likely to get elected if they are married, have children. And it's simply because it allows us to kind of conceptualize who they are, and it gives us context as to the person. And so it creates this illusion of connection and trust.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of like how you feel, like like if you listen to like Joe Rogan or any of these really big podcasts or influencers, like Nora Smith. Uh, I've been seeing all of the remakes of the trending content of
Oh my
people
gosh.
imitating them.
Nara and Lucky, the parodies of them is so
Hilarious.
funny. It's so unhinged.
But yeah, it's that effect where you feel like you know them. And if you've ever actually met someone in real life that you've watched a ton of their content and you go up and you start talking to them, they have no idea who the heck you are. But you act
you
like,
know like everything about them.
yeah, like they're your best friend.
Yeah.
Uh,
And that's the effect that you want to create. And ideally, you also, leverage your social platforms so that you actually do know who these people are, and like you do have that connection with them. You do have that understanding of your audience, and you do like connect with people on an individual level. But yeah, so let's get into like the ways people do this wrong, some kind of mistakes we see, so you can kind of self-diagnose and make some shifts. Number 1, like, either mistake slash, like, struggle question that people have is, like, "I don't wanna share too much. How do I go about sharing and, like, creating a personal brand without having to give the internet my entire life story?" And people also feel like people are not going to be interested in what they have to say or, like, what they have to share. They're like, "Oh, my life's not that interesting." And it's interesting because people say that, but then they turn around and watch people post videos, millions of views of them cleaning their car or restocking their fridge.
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Really? You guys watch those videos, but you don't think you have anything interesting to share?"
Yeah.
It blows my mind because I know, like, the people that say that, like, I know you watch those videos. I know you watch those restock videos. Like, what do you mean that there's nothing interesting to talk about, even just in your personal life? And then the other thing that I see is, people that don't lean into the personal brand, they really blend into their industry and they're like, "Oh my gosh, my industry's oversaturated." Your industry's not oversaturated. You're just creating the same type of content as everyone else, and there's nothing to differentiate you. There's no reason for people to go with you over your competitors. If you don't have a personal brand, you create objections for yourself that you then have to overcome. And you also are able to, if you use your personal brand effectively, you're also to overcome or eliminate a lot of objections. And people don't really talk about that very much.
And the big thing when it comes to and like you're talking about like the restock videos, and a lot of people will overemphasize that like when they're building their personal brand, like they'll overshare
Mhm.
sometimes. Sometimes you either way overshare or you way undershare
It's
share.
it's like oversharing to the point where it's like, the type of thing you would, like, tell your therapist, or undersharing where it's like, "Here's a photo of my morning coffee." It's like, "Okay, well, that didn't really do anything for us."
So, I mean, I'll give 2 examples here that I can think of off like, right off the top of my head. One would be and everyone who's watching this or listening to this probably knows, and that is, like, Alex Hormozy. Obviously, comes across as business guru, but his, like, personal life is he loves to lift, he loves to, be jacked,
Yeah, they
right?
talk a lot about, like, fitness and, like, their lifestyle, and you kind of get a sense of those elements through what's shown with their brand, and that's the key there where I think people think of a personal brand and they think that they need to sit down and do, like, a story time video and spill their guts to the internet, but that's not really it. It's just understanding kind of the nuances of your personality and how you do
Mhm.
things differently and weaving those into your content.
And sometimes he'll literally just go, like, to the gym and record a video talking about business while working out.
Right. It's
It's
very
subtle.
subtle. Yeah.
Uh,
It's like
I've
it's like my Instagram stories where I am riding my horse and I'm, like, talking
yeah.
about Pinterest marketing.
Or, like, I'll record a YouTube video when I'm, like, trail running a 14er. Like, similar, like, I'm talking about business, but it's, like, I'm on the mountain.
Mhm.
And, like, these are, like, just different ways, and like, the best part about this is you can be, like, super creative. The other person who really stands out that does a great job involving his personal life in a way that actually he's probably one of the better guys that I actually follow that I really like how he does it, is Jesse Itzler. He does, the really big calendar for the entire year, if you
Oh, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
If you don't know who he is, you've probably seen the ads because like he started that business last year and it's like blowing up.
Mhm.
But he's like a runner and he always will tie in these experiences from like Ironmans, ultra marathons, marathons that he's done. And he'll be like, I was out there and it started raining and it was terrible. And like my seat fell off my bike. So I was like sitting on this piece of pipe that was going up my butt while I was doing this Ironman. And you know what? That's what business is like. When the IRS is coming after you and, you have people leaving your business and your competitors are closing in and like all this different stuff and you like equate it to like business.
That's
Um,
funny.
and he does like these great things.
And part of, like, personal branding is exactly like you said, is infusing that storytelling into your brand where you're not just sitting down and being like, "Here's 3 tips for this." It's, like,
Yeah.
actually giving
Uh,
context again as to, like, why you believe the things that you believe.
and the best thing is, and you can do this, and we're talking about like personal brands as well, but just like on a content front,
Mhm,
especially like if you're in the business space. And this is like really huge on Instagram right now. The algorithm is really changing from like the high paced, like over editing to
mhm,
more of a slow it down storytelling.
mhm.
And this is like creators evolving on Instagram. You can see everyone like from Mr. Beast on YouTube to doing it to like your average
And
short form
I have
creator.
to I have to add my caveat, my correction.
Yes.
The algorithm is changing because the consumer behavior of the platform is changing. The algorithm doesn't just change.
Replace algorithm with audience and you'll always be successful. Little tip.
Yeah.
Uh but anyways, to kind of like summarize is if you don't always have like and you want to include stories in your content, but you always don't have a personal story for the type of content you want to create, you can pull off of other people's stories
Yeah,
that
that
already exist.
confusing that halo effect in sales psychology. But when I've been playing with this idea and I've talked about it with clients is this idea of curated authenticity. And it's not that you are not going to be real and that you're not going to, share honest views and takes and experiences, but it's that you're curating the bits of yourself that you are going to share with the internet. And again, that's not being authentic. That's not being real. That's just not airing your dirty laundry on the internet. And so you can be very strategic and intentional with the things that you are really authentic and vulnerable about. And you can cater it to be, applicable to your brand and your content without again having to sit down for a story time video where you tell us your entire life story.
Yeah. Again, don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah. And going along the lines of like curated authenticity, one of the things that and it's so important that we have an entire module in our programs, an entire section that just goes over this, and it's what we call your business butterfly effect. And this is an exercise we take every single client through where you essentially sit down and you brain dump the bullet points that are impactful and that were kind of the dominoes that had to fall to get you to where you are at now. And so what we're looking for is a through line from your starting point to your end point, even if they are two seemingly completely unrelated events. We've had clients in the past, and like, well, mine that I always talk about is like the fact that if you go back far enough, the first domino that had to fall for this business to happen was me being diagnosed with cancer.
Mhm.
And for a lot of people, like if they have, I've heard this from clients, like if they have a wellness or a fitness brand, oftentimes their through line or that first domino that kind of set things in motion was them growing up with like the almond mom who was like very self-conscious of her body and like instilled that into their child. Or we have people who are in the mental health space, and that kind of domino effect that like had to start for them to be able to have this business. And even though it was a long road and kind of a weird through line, but again is like having a negative relationship when they were younger, and that somehow started this trajectory for them into like mental health and coaching. And so it's it's a really valuable exercise because what you're able to do is essentially number one, determine and clarify for yourself and for your audience, and give yourself really clear talking points as to why you believe what you believe and why you do what you do. And it comes back to that mere exposure effect and giving people context and being able to place you, being able to understand why you're here, why you're doing what you're doing. And when you make a post or it's a little bit agitational or you have a hot take that you can share, people understand where you're coming from, and there's that context again as to why they should listen to you. And that's really really important. And then the other thing with personal branding, what we call the trifecta, which is vulnerability, aspiration, and controversy. And if you can do those three things really well in a single piece of content, you not only have a recipe for a viral video, but a highly converting video as well. So, to give you guys some context as to what this looks like when done well, let's share one of our recent clients that we've had that I think is really good at doing this. So, this person is kind of in the mental health space, and something that she's done really well to differentiate herself from her competitors is rather than just sharing tips and tricks and education, she's very consistent with sharing her transformation and the things that she has been through and how those things have aided her in having the experience and understanding and the frameworks that she teaches. And so there's always that undertone of context there where it's not just, here's how to do this, here's how to change this or deal with this anxiety symptom. It's specifically, I went through this. This is what I know. Here's how you can apply it. And so infusing the personal brand in that way, she is her own best example and her own best result. Of course, she has tons of client results and testimonials to share, which is it's like a whole other thing. But from the personal brand perspective, her experience and her life is constantly being woven into every single reel and TikTok, whether it's giving, an example from like herself of like, I went through this and this is what I did and this is how I got over it, or even just sharing the result, like being able, like, I was able to go from this to this and this is how. And so always infusing that so that one, people can see themselves in your story, which that brings us full circle back to the objection handling, because if people can see themselves in your story, then you are eliminating the, well, what if this doesn't work for me? Or does this apply to me? Or how do I know that this is going to work? Objections, because again, if they can see themselves in you and you showcase the transformation and you showcase the frameworks and how you get them from point A to point B, you're going to eliminate that objection. And it's as simple as sharing your personal story and then being able to see themselves in reflected back.
And in this example, like, she was someone who went through, like, basically what she helps people recover from.
Exactly.
What I would say, if that doesn't apply to you, you don't necessarily have to share your, experiences of doing it for yourself. But again, going back to the examples earlier of like
And
Jesse
the
Isner,
butterfly effect of
well, what
like,
experiences do you have in your life that you can tie into the content
and
that
and how did those experiences bring you to where you're at? Like there's a lot of people that, like, for example, our one client we had that was a physical therapist.
Mhm,
He's not a physical therapist because he had injuries and needed a physical therapist. It's just something that he was passionate about. But his through line with his story was like growing up and doing sports and playing basketball and watching his teammates get hurt.
mhm,
And being involved in sports and sports medicine and just being around that. And so, even though it's not something that he personally went through, having again that context as to like, why were you even interested in this? What was that spark? Is really impactful for your personal brand.
mhm. And then I would also add, because you're one of the things you can do is you can tie stories in, for example, kind of like what we're doing right now, talking about how clients applied or do the specific things that you do in your business, right?
Mhm.
And those are like all like different ways where you can tie in stories. You can tie in essentially evidence that
Mhm.
what you do works, all of these different things that can gain trust with your
Mhm.
viewer on top of it being an entertaining piece of content.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think the key, I think what you said is really important is like giving evidence. And the difference between like a personal brand and infusing your story into like founder focused content versus just giving like educational content is, instead of information, you're sharing insight. And so it's like information, it's just here's the stuff, here's the 3 tips. Whereas insight, it's like, here's what happened, here's what I did, and then here's been the effect. And those little nuances of like somebody who's already been through it or someone who's coached many people through that same scenario, that's where the insight comes from rather than information.
Yeah.
And so that's the shift. Let's talk about some tangible takeaways that you can literally
Actually
implement right
apply.
now. Yeah, literally apply right now. So, number one, starting with that butterfly effect exercise, it's not quite the same if you're not walking through it, step by step with us, but go through and just brain dump a bullet pointed list of all the different things that kind of happened in your life that contributed in some way, even if it was just kind of pushing you in a certain direction to you having the business and the brand that you have now, And so map this out in a series of bullet points and tie these to insights that you share within your brand. So take your personal information, all those bullet points, take your information that you want to share, so your business brand, and then connect them. Why do you share that information? What about that information came from personal experience? Where did you get that information? Why do you have the opinions you have? Make those connections, and that's what you actually create content about. One other tangible thing that I think is important is that with the personal brand, and I've kind of alluded to this a couple times, is people seem to think that they need to sit down and make a story time video in order to have a personal brand, and that's not the case at all. Your personal brand is going to be woven in throughout all of your digital real estate.
Every 1 out of 4 posts is like a really good opportunity to take a personal story or like a client result or something like that, weave that in to
Mhm.
your content. Whether it's a short form video, whether it's a YouTube video, whether it's a podcast, by
Mhm.
weaving that in,
Mhm.
people become aware of who you are. Now, every piece of content, sometimes it's too much
Yeah.
because people
It's
in
like,
the
okay,
beginning,
enough about you.
yeah.
Like, let's get
Now, I will say some people have really interesting stories and you can go like really viral, just based off of your stories.
and that's the thing is, like, it doesn't have to be a whole story. It can be one sentence out of your video that just
Mhm.
nods and gives a little bit of context. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be, here's my entire life story and why I believe this, and now I'm going to give you this information. It's just, when I first started, I was here. And so what I learned was this, and this, and now we're doing that. Right. Like one sentence is all it has to be for context as you kind of weave it in. And that's your active content. But then your other things that it can kind of live on your page. So, having a my story highlight that talks through kind of those main bullet points that lives on your feed so that it's there and people can access it. Having a pinned post that kind of gives in goes into your story, making sure that you are infusing elements of your story and why you do what you do into your highlights about your offers or your start here highlight. And again, give context as to, like, why did you build this offer? Why did you make this course? Why do you do coaching? And again, it can just be one sentence that kind of ties everything together. It doesn't have to be super dramatic. Your bio, your mission statement, your website copy, tying it in gracefully and subtly, I think, is the key.
Yeah. Again, if you're hitting on it too hard, like doing a my story video, again, I don't know why it is. So many people just automatically go to like the my story.
Yeah, they're like, we need to do a story
Yeah.
time, sit down, give my entire life story for an hour and a
You don't need
half.
to do that,
That's
period.
that's not that's not the point here.
And again, you can like weave it into videos. So where it's like, when I was doing this, that's how it relates to you doing that,
Right.
right? As an example. Now you could phrase that better in a short form content for a hook,
It
but
can be
that's how you
one
can weave it in.
sentence. It can be woven into the meat of your video. It can be in your hook. It can be like, this is something that I learned from XYZ.
Yeah.
And then you go into giving
When
the
I was
information.
building my business, I learned that, when
Mhm,
I was out show running, I realized that's a lot like doing
mhm.
this.
In my first year of business, I realized blah blah blah. My life has never been the same since I learned blah blah blah.
And the best thing is there's tons of content out there that already exists. So if you're doing proper market research, you should be able to find tons of examples for your specific niche and your specific industry that will apply that you can actually make.
Yeah, 100%. We have a whole episode about market research, so go listen to that if you are stuck, don't know how to do that. All right, that's it for this episode. Go take an audit of your accounts and look at ways that you can infuse not only your personality, but your story into your content in subtle little ways, and just get in the habit of doing it consistently. That's what will make a great founder focused brand.
Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And
Leave a
of course,
review, a nice one, please.
yeah, please, if there's something we can do better, let us know there too. And as always, be sure to follow us on social media, Kenda, KENDA.Laney, and then Soren.Laney as well, basically on all platforms.
Yep.
So that's it. Have a great day, guys.
Thanks for being here.